Karen, Mayer Cunningham, special education boss. It's been a minute. We want you to like this. We want you to share it. We want you to comment. Hit the bell so you can subscribe. So anytime we do a video, you'll get notification. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Reopening schools in COVID. So what do we know? That there's nothing, we don't know anything, right? What we do know is schools are going to reopen. We don't know what that looks like. And there's a lot of discussion of what that's going to look like, what it's not going to look like, what you can have, what you can't have. So we're going to try to unpack that and get started on your questions. So everything is changing minute by minute by minute, or as we would say in our world, second by second by second. I've had so many people reach out to me and go, I feel like you know more than most people. I do know more than most people about hairspray and lipstick, but I do not know more than most people about the reopening of schools. It's contingent on health. It's contingent on, whatever the governor says to do, and whatever, the federal government says to do. So let's talk about that. So we are going to make sure that we give our parents the best options available. What does that look like? What does that mean for their kiddo? And what are the implications? And a lot of you guys have emailed us with great questions that have 15 questions, which I love that. Hey guys. And so keep sending us the questions. Some of the questions are going to require a personal Zoom. They're not specific to something we get to talk about here, but we want to answer your questions as efficiently as possible. So the coronavirus disease 2019 is still with us. And so what I do know is we've all learned to wash our hands. And for some people, online education was fantastic. It worked out great. It was everything they ever wanted to have for their kiddos. That's a rare incident. So when you look at special populations or special education, there have been some challenges and struggles. And so one of the things that we were concerned about was last spring, we didn't get FAPE. We didn't get a free appropriate public education. We didn't get delivered the totality of a student's IEP document. And so we were due compensatory time when we returned to school to look at the effects of regression and impact. Now we're still in COVID. We thought it would be gone. I really thought it would be gone by now, but it's not. So we have to look at our options for school. None of them are perfect, and they're contingent on a myriad of things. So I'm going to talk about the 3 choices that I talk about with my families. So when I work with my families, it's obviously very specific to their child's disability, the acuity of their disability, the social, emotional impact, the behavioral impact, and the academic impact of their disability in a general ed setting. Now we have to add on the impact when you stayed home, or you didn't have non-disabled peers, or you were glad you didn't have peers, right? And so when I work with my families, we talk about the 3 different options. So as I understand it now, and of course it'll change at midnight, is that you have 2 options. I think that you think you have 2 options, but I always think that there's a 3rd option, and we're going to unpack that. So number 1 is virtual, remote, distance. And it's all those things, right? It's virtual, it's remote, and it's distant learning. It is not the same thing as being in a classroom, in a school building, with all the things, right? We don't have ancillary time. We don't have PE, we don't have recess, we don't have lunch, which is my favorite sport. We're not riding the bus, all of those things. So what are the benefits of virtual? Some of the benefits of virtual are that the product that the child's expected to complete is smaller, right? We're not expecting them to complete 360 instructional minutes a day. However, since we have rolled out reopening schools to 2020, 2021, it's very different than it looked in the spring. So when the pandemic started, there was a lot of grace, and there's still going to be a lot of grace for families. Kind of do what you can. We don't want to exacerbate your child's disability. Don't push them. Do what you can and turn it in, and we'll get through this. Now, fast forward, we're going into the fall of 2020, 2021. And as what I'm seeing from schools is that they expect us to be present in an academic day. So what does that look like? That looks like if your child is going to do virtual, we're talking about virtual first, then that child will have to be home, obviously, because that's where the virtual is, unless we all want to meet at McDonald's because they have Wi-Fi. So we're going to be home. I assume there's going to be an adult, and they're going to help them log on. There are specific times that they have to be logged on. There are specific requirements. And I've heard everything in between the truth and not the truth and what's really going to happen. So, are we going to have to wear masks? Are we going to be 6 feet apart? Are we going to have to do this? So, one of the things I talk about with my families is I think the biggest impact for virtual for kiddos is that the American Pediatric Association says that children that are children are under 18, individuals under 18 should not look at a screen or hold a screen for more than 1 hour a day. So when you look at virtual, is Billy sitting there with his iPad? Are you looking on Dad's jumbo football screen? What does that look like? Is it meaningful? I was with a client today and she said, well, my son liked virtual because he could see himself on the screen. I'm like, me too. That's my favorite part. So 2 things we're looking at, right, in special ed: meaningful benefit, harmful effect. Was there a meaningful benefit in the spring? And maybe you can't compare that to the fall. Maybe you've decided that Aunt Myrtle is moving in and she's a retired teacher and she's going to teach the whole subdivision and she likes children. If you're going to replicate what you did in the fall and it was great or it had a meaningful benefit, those are the sort of components you have to think about. What does that look like? Can I expect Billy Smith to stand in the living room for 360 instructional minutes? And there are kids that can do that. There are kids that are like, I love this. This is fantastic. There's nobody here breathing and clicking their pen, right? So all the things that you have to consider. You're going to have to collect data. Remember data? We talked about that last year. Data. That's how you make all meaningful decisions. And so you're going to continue with that journal that we started, right? What does it look like in remote learning? How does it affect you emotionally, socially, academically, functionally, and behaviorally? So it will be your responsibility to continue to collect that data and the impact. Are you a good teacher? Do you have a printer? Do you get along with your child when you're helping them learn? So those are things you have to think about. Can you have somebody that stays home with them all day? Do you have the bandwidth to do the remote learning? Do you have like today, I just went and got a thing called an Ethernet. Do you guys know what an Ethernet is? It's for old people that can't figure out how to use the Wi-Fi. So that's something that I got so that I am directly tied from my computer straight into the Wi-Fi because it's not working so much and I'm still doing mediations and due process and Zoom meetings all summer long. So that's something you have to consider. Virtual is going to be a good fit for people if they are concerned about their child being exposed to other humans. When you're at home, you can control who comes in and out of your house. But let's talk about the other components of virtual. It is my belief and my understanding, just sort of the information coming out of the East Coast, where everything comes from originally. It's my assumption and my belief between advocates and attorneys right now that if you in fact choose virtual during the fall of 2020's spring 2021, it's not the same thing as you being denied FAPE. Why is that? Because the school is open. You did have the option, you will have the option of going to school. If you choose virtual, then your IEP will have to be amended. Why is that, Karen? Well, it has to be amended because you have a change of placement. The placement is being offered at your school. You're not accepting that for reasons that are personal between your family and your child with a disability. And so we want to make sure that you know that. Whereas in the fall, and you didn't get a delivery of FAPE, that's because it wasn't available. So that's something to consider. So for instance, when we have a kiddo that's homebound, when we have a kiddo that's hospitalized, right? We do an IEP amendment and we change the hours. We take a lot of it out. We change the related services because they can't tolerate going into a school building, right? So that's something you want to think about. Do you want your IEP amended? Because in that situation, unlike what I said in the spring, you have to amend the IEP because you chose between on campus and online. You chose online. Okay, so virtual, virtual, virtual. Did anybody in the feed enjoy virtual? No, my dogs didn't even enjoy virtual. They didn't. They were like, "Why are y'all home all day?" So you have to consider all the components. How much time are you going to get? Is it going to be beneficial for your child to have to log in at 11:15 and 4:03? Um, I think for very few people, just from our team feedback, we didn't run across a lot of people that enjoyed virtual in the spring. What we did find from our families is kiddos with neurological differences that have intact cognition or a little higher loved it, right? They got up, they did their work, and they got on, their Nintendo Switch. And that was great. They didn't have to work on their social skills or anything. So those kind of kiddos loved it. But I didn't hear a lot of other people going, this was fantastic. But if you think it's fantastic, write fantastic in the queue. Okay. So virtual. How do they deliver the product? What are you expected to do? I was in a meeting last week and this man said to an attorney on the Zoom, he goes, when I run out of ink, I'm out of ink. I'm not buying more ink. That's how we talk in Texas. Not buying more ink. So there are all those components. You want to reach out to your principal. Each campus is autonomous. They sort of run their own little sheriff's town and get as much of an understanding of what the expectation of you is to deliver the product home virtual. So for instance, if we had a kiddo that was homebound, that parent that stays home with that child that's too sick to go to school, she's responsible for making sure that Billy does all of his product, he turns it in, and then she coordinates with the teacher. So huge responsibility. I'm sure you're fantastic at it. So those are some of the components of virtual. You're not going to get your accommodations. You're not going to get related services. You're not going to get a personal care supplement. You're not going to get an AU supplement. You're going to get some academic product, some related services, instructional services at home. That's what you're going to get. The grading system, I know last spring everybody got 100. Isn't that great? Great. Virtual will be right for some people, very few people that'll be probably their first choice. Okay. Number 2, in person. What does that look like? So everybody, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not going back. Not sending my kids back. I'm not sending my kids back. So let's kind of unpack that and talk about that. When I talk to parents with kids with disabilities and we talk about going back, in a lot of ways, it's a plus because there's going to be a lot less humans in the school. There just is, right? So a lot less humans. So that might be beneficial for some kiddos. It might be easier for them to learn social skills because there's not so many people around them. It might be easier for the teacher to actually see what Billy's deficits are. And there's probably going to be a lot more grace extended this fall to our little friends that go back to campuses. So I think in a lot of ways, it's a great thing. Are we required to wear masks? So no, because it messes up your lipstick. So I don't know. I don't know. So if you're under a certain age, it's not a requirement. I don't know how you keep 5-year-olds from not touching each other and hugging each other. I don't know how we keep the AU kiddos from going, Billy touches mask, he's touching it, that's not your mask. Why does he have that mask? His mask is crooked, right? So you'll have all that. But the guidelines from school district attorneys is if a student with a disability can't wear a mask for whatever reason, we're going to extend them some grace. We're not going to tell a kiddo who has sensory issues or a breathing issue, you have to wear a mask. So it's not quite that stringent. And so I think in a lot of ways, going back to campus is a great thing if that's what you want to do. For me, when I work with clients in our team, the thing that we share with them is, this sounds terrible, and I know that somebody on one of those news networks will twist my words. So I'm not so concerned about the kiddos. I said that. I am concerned about the impact of the kiddos looking at adults with a mask on, looking at adults who are sick and they got the COVID. Is it the COVID? Does it get a V? And our kiddos that worry, and all kiddos worry, Mrs. Smith is gone. Did she die? Are you going to get it? So those are things you have to think about. I assume that it's going to be a year of substitute teachers. It just is, right? So one of my friends, her husband's a police officer. Once he's exposed to COVID, he has to quarantine for 14 days, and so do all the contestants in the house. So, Miss Trisha is your teacher. You love her. She goes home. Her husband's on the SWAT team, and she's exposed to the COVID. So she has to quarantine, which means she can't come back. And then a lot of our little kiddos, kids just worry, right? So that's something you have to consider. Is a year full of subs going to be beneficial for kiddos? Are they going to worry about that? There'll probably be a lot of talking about the COVID in the school all year long because nobody else is talking about it nonstop, 24 hours a day. So those are things that you have to take into consideration. Is that going to have a meaningful benefit or harmful effect on your student? And a lot of times we won't know until we know. It's my understanding that some schools or all schools are demanding or requiring for you to choose, right? You have to choose in person or remote, in person or remote. And then you can change it every grading period, which is either 6 weeks or at 9 weeks. So if you get there and it doesn't work for you, obviously you can go virtual. We don't need you can go home. You don't have to stay there. However, if you choose virtual, this is, as I understand it, it's just always just changing every single day. If you choose virtual and you've decided he is wearing me out, he needs to go to school, right? And we have a cure for it, right? Like just a shot of Fabulosa or something like that. Then you can't just go, okay, it's Labor Day, he needs to go back. So if you want him at school, you have to let them know that, right? We have to know how many party favors we have to have, how many cafeteria plates we have to have, and how many teachers. So those are things that you have to consider. Again, it's changing. We have a school district near here. They're one of the first school districts to come out and say, we're open for ESY, extended school year. Fantastic. And then they said, and we're not. We're not open for ESY. We're going to do it remote. Actually, we're not going to do it, right? So then they came out and said they're going to open for the fall, which would be good because that's when you go to school, right? And you could choose. Actually, it's in the paper. You choose. You just, whatever you want, you choose it. And now they're like, we're never going back to school. So, yeah, that's really clear. And I know schools are frustrated with not specific guidelines from their states. I know states are frustrated without specific guidelines from their federal government. So I think they should just call me and ask. You just ask me, I can figure this out. We can just all go to the football stadium, have some nachos, it'll be fine. So again, it's a day by day thing. It is now what is it? Is it January? I think it's January. Could be. Is it Christmas Eve? Yes. So it's July 21st. Our kiddos here in Houston start school as early as the 12th of August or the 19th. That's pretty quick. And there's just a lot of things to take into consideration. One of the questions that I got a lot was, will that impact my child's IEP if I don't send them? Will that impact my child's ability to have inclusion next year? And that's sort of like, how many colors of blue are there? So what I would tell my families is it shouldn't impact them. Whatever the IEP we agreed upon at May 3rd or whatever should be the IEP. It shouldn't be impacted because you chose virtual. So let's talk about the third one that I consider with my families, and that is to unenroll them. Yeah, I said that, unenroll them. So why would I say that? I would say that because you have a child that's a special education student, a student with a disability who's in fact in need of specialized instruction and or related in social services. If you unenroll them and you homeschool them, and there's lots of homeschoolings, is that a word? And co-ops, then the IEP that you had is completely intact. You don't have to amend it. You don't have to do any of that. So I have a lot of families that have kiddos that are immune compromised. They have seizures. They have medical concerns. So they're going to wait. They're going to unenroll their kids. You just go and unenroll them. And then you sign up for, I don't know, I don't homeschool. I always say I believe in homeschooling, just not my home and not my children. So, but there's a million homeschool opportunities. There's online curriculum, and those are all standards-based. Your state will let you know which ones they accept. So that's something that you can consider. And then your IEP is not affected, because a lot of people are concerned if they go virtual, you're going to have to amend the IEP. You just are. Then how do I get those things back, right? And so that's a real concern. So some of my clients are unenrolling their students, and then we'll just have an IEP meeting in the spring for them to return to school the next school year or the next semester. So we're going to get into some of the conversations and questions. Somebody emailed me and said, I'm going to give this another week. You are? And then that's it. We're out of here. I'm just going to give it another week. So some school districts that I love all school districts. I do. One school district has one sheet, and it says check back frequently, which I think is great. It actually has one sheet with like no graphics on it. I love that. That's how I write a Word document. Okay. So this says, dear parents and staff, we wanted to update you on what you can expect. What can you expect? That nothing will be the same, right? You may have seen that several neighborhood districts have already released their plans or announced that they will release them soon due to earlier start dates. We are very fortunate that the first day of instruction is not till August 24th, providing us with several extra weeks to finalize our plans, which include numerous and significant and safety protocols for our student and staff. Underline. When they underline it, they want you to really focus. Keep in mind that all plans are what? Subject to change, based on guidance from local and state officials. So it's changing, it's changing, it's changing. Your school district will have a school board meeting, and they will say, hey, we decided this Thursday and now we're changing our minds. So you have to keep up with that. Are we going to have football season, which in Texas, like, can we even go on? I don't know. Did I say I didn't know? So some things have completely canceled. Some things have not canceled. I don't know if they can take that back or not. However, in Texas, the great state of Texas, and it says, TEA, Texas Education Agency, issues comprehensive guidelines for a safe return to on-campus instruction for the 2020-2021 school year. Here's what it says. Listen to me. Daily on-campus learning will be available to all parents, this is all in Texas, to all parents who would like their students to learn in school each day. So all is Hebrew for all. Let's read it again with feeling. Daily on-campus learning will be available to all parents who would like their students to learn in school each day. Now, there is a little extension our state's got. I think it's 4 weeks. I don't really know what that means, but our governor, Governor Greg Abbott, is saying that if you want your kid to go to school, there'll be somebody there to school them. Okay. I think the hardest thing for parents is that we have all these guidelines, and it says at the bottom, if your child is a special education student, email. So it's just all these guidelines for general ed. Wow, that was really helpful. I do have a lot of smart friends who are like thinking outside the box, like they've hired a teacher and like 10 kids from the block are going to Miss Cindy's house every day. There are people that are homeschooling, and then they're part of a co-op where they do some things together. So we have a lot more options than we used to. One of my families, who I adore all my families, she sent a very spirited email to the school district. And she said, I'm a single mother. I got to go to work. You want to pay for private school, or you're going to open your doors? I love that. Don't mince words. So, this is affecting a lot of people. People will have to quit their job to stay home with their 7-year-old. My last baby is 17, so I don't have to stay home with him. He's really smart, and he knows how to use a printer. So those are kind of, unfortunately, we probably have too much information. None of it matches. And if you listen to the news, I recommend that you don't ever listen to the news for any reason at all. So as it changes, we'll give you updates. As it gets more muddy, we'll give you those updates. As it gets clearer, we'll give you those updates. And then we'll share with you sort of the guidance from school districts, their legal teams, about the grace that we're going to give kiddos, which we've always given them, because there is going to be an emotional impact from COVID. There just is. I'm 100 years old, and I was in school in maybe 1978 when Reagan was shot, and it was very traumatic for me. I don't even think we missed school. Did we miss school? You guys even know who Reagan is? No. So, and that was just a one-day thing. I know from our team the emotional impact here in Houston. We had a little rainstorm a few years ago called Harvey. We missed 12 days of school, and the impact that affected kids for a year. They had to move. They had to do this. So we're not ever going to really know the full impact. So we just kind of have to walk through it with grace. Like I said before, you have to do what? You have to collect data. If you want our data collection forms, just shoot us an email at karen@specialeducationboss.com. We'll get you that form. If you want the sheet on compensatory time, how to calculate that, want the sheet about reading rates, because all those things are important, we can get you that as well. When we get kind of to a landing place on the school year, we'll make you a handout for that because you guys live for a handout. Okay, here's one of our questions. And if you guys have a question, one of my team members are here, just put it in the queue. She'll hand it to me in big print because I like big print and I cannot lie. So it says, is that a song? It says, stop laughing. If this whole mess continues much longer, you know what? I'm going to go live on Facebook and go, listen, this whole mess continues much longer. How realistic would it be to issue vouchers for therapy? So vouchers are something we know not of in the South. So I wouldn't imagine there'll be any issuing of vouchers for therapy. Special ed and dyslexia seems non-essential. Are there any organizations that may push for it? So your special education product is essential. There are not components of it that aren't essential. It may be an absurd idea, but I know there won't be compensation and we'll be getting more and more behind. So not true. There is compensatory education due to kiddos in a 504 or special education consideration of from those 10 weeks that we missed, 17,500 minutes in the spring. However, I wouldn't imagine that Betsy DeVos or your state leaders are going to give you compensatory time if you choose to stay home in the fall when schools are open. I could be wrong. I've been wrong about like a couple things in my lifetime. Okay. How do we, this was a question we had earlier. So compensatory ed, again, if you guys remember, if I had a client, compensatory education is something you usually get at the end of a mediation, a settlement, a due process, an OCR federal filing with the U.S. Department of Education. It is relief provided to the student to put the student in the position he would have occupied had there been no IDEA violation. So I have those or ask for those to be delivered over a 24-month period. So we never want compensatory education to be punitive for a child. We don't want it to be like, oh, you're going to driver's ed all day Saturday because you missed, your Braille instruction. All right, prep for school. Discuss returning to school. I'm still not sure of the full spectrum starting back for special education. My child will be in 5th grade. He will not wear a mask at all. I did all I could to assist him with online learning for the end of 4th grade and ESY, and it was a mess. I don't want to miss out on the information we parents need to know. Please include me. So again, as it comes out, we'll give it to you. We'll direct you to where you need to go in your state's website, federal website. Again, you always want to go to U.S. Department of Education, OSEP, Office of Special Education. You want to look at special education, not special populations. That's different. And look at what the guidelines are. They update all the time. So the federal guidelines and the state guidelines should be really kind of the same with just different language. So, and this is so personal, this decision. It's like telling somebody to stay divorced. Is that stay married or get divorced? Do you stay divorced? Some people do. So if you have a neighbor who has the same child with the same disability, you got to make the decision that's best for your family and your family right now. One of my team members who is awesome, her kid's amazing, but she has an elderly parent living with her. So while she wants her cherub to go to school, he's going to come back with possible, stuff on him. So just an endless Endless considerations. All right. Next, my biggest concern is the lack of direction by the powers that be, federal and state level, concerning guidance for local education agencies or state education agencies for special education and at-risk populations, and getting them back into the classroom. It seems to be that special populations would be deserving or specialized guidance in these trying times. I have had a hard time being comfortable when related to COVID that the guidance forthcoming is one size fits all. Our LEA, local education agency, has decided at this time if we will be virtual or in classroom, has not decided. You don't want to rush into it. And if we are not back to brick and mortar, how do we even begin to address assessments, evaluation, and compensatory services? Good question. So none of that stops, right? If you had already requested an evaluation, evaluations are happening. We have been Zooming all summer long. The other day I Zoomed from 7:45 in the morning until 8:43 at night. So we're doing due process, mediation, transfers, new evals, evaluations that have come back. There's lots of evaluators that are working over the summer because they can do them remotely if they're diagnostic, or those sorts of things. So how do we address assessments? How you address them is you email the person that's doing your assessment and say, when can we expect our assessments? So to assess your child, they will need to have access to your child, right? So sometimes you can do that assessment online. I had a client that was just in Florida, and the school district here did the assessment by Zoom. Maybe if it's an assessment for physical therapy or orientation and mobility, I need to be in close proximity to that student. What about evaluations and assessment? Same thing. And compensatory services. So again, this is how we do compensatory services. After school starts, you would call for an IEP meeting. I'm requesting an IEP meeting for consideration for compensatory services for my student that was denied FAPE in the spring of 2019, 2020. And then at that meeting, we would talk about what that looks like. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to roll out what our recommendations would be to our clients. We had a meeting the other day, like a pre-meeting, and the dad goes, what you do is you just add up the minutes and we'll take those. And so those minutes, that sounds great. But 17,500 minutes, I don't know how many hours that is. Do you know how many hours that is? But you're going to calculate that right now. She's calculating it. 17,500. So it's about 300 hours. Is that right? I don't know a lot of math. I know tall, grande, and vente, which really is the only math you need to know. 17,500 minutes divided by 60 equals, that's what an hour is. In Texas, it's 60. 291.6 hours. So you're not going to go in to Elm ISD and go, I'd like my kid to have 291 hours, because that would be ridiculous. So we want to have meaningful benefit, not a harmful effect. We don't water concrete. We don't just give. So I would, if it was one of our team members who were looking at the three big ones, language arts, reading, and math. And then if there's some way to have a meaningful benefit, maybe in-home training or parent training to sort of bridge those gaps where there's a disconnect, and so that we can learn to generalize skills that he's obtained at school or at school. And I was going to say, and cross-contaminate them. We don't use the word cross-contaminate. All right, next question. Is your hair color natural? Yes, I wrote a natural check for it. Thank you. If we stay home due to medical, is FAPE denied? Did you make this up, or is this a real question? It's a real question. So one of the other options, which has nothing to do with COVID, is homebound. Homebound is very serious. We don't just go, hey, my kid has dyslexia, I will take homebound. That way those teachers come to me. No. So homebound is, and you can look in your, how we take, is it called roll? Attendance. Roll or biscuit. Okay, so how we take attendance, that's how it's monitored. So in Texas, the statute for homebound consideration means that a doctor, a medical doctor, not a veterinarian, but a medical doctor writes a letter and says, based on this medical need, I'm requesting that this student receives her education at home. Couple things that you should know. Has to come from a medical doctor, has to be a medical reason, right? and the student is expected to miss up to 4 weeks of school that year. So what does that mean? That student has a history. That student, by being exposed to other people or knowing that you're going to be exposed to other people that have a high chance of contamination or infection or sickness, would just exacerbate the acuity of their own disability. So if you just stayed home, so you're going to have to choose one of those options. Somebody asked me the other day, what if I just don't go? That's what I do to the gym. I just don't go. So you can't just stay home. It's the law that your kid has to receive an education. So you have to choose something. So if you want to just stay home, then you would have to unenroll your child. Okay? So you're going to have to choose something. And there are a choice of 4 amazing options. And you have to choose the one that's the most amazing for your kiddo. Our clients usually have a file that's, I don't know, 200-300 pages long. So each kiddo, it's kind of easy for us to see as advocates what probably would be the best for them. So I had a family we worked the other day, and she just, she was nervous. She didn't know what to do. And when we talked about it, it was like, it's going back. So it's going to be the best thing for this kiddo. I just know it. All right. You guys can keep sending in your questions. I have an amazing assistant over here. If the student is unenrolled and assessment is pending, will it resume when student is re-enrolled later? So that's a really good question. So if you make your child available, they'll assess them. Just like if your kiddo was at St. Anne's school or a private school, you could ask for assessment from the school district that private school is in. They go to the private school and do the assessment. So you would just let them know one of 2 things. I want to pause the assessments, or I want to complete the assessments. We always want to what? Complete the assessments, right? Will it resume when student is re-enrolled later? It resumes or continues based on your directive. Special education testing is contingent. Consent. I really need to have coffee later. It's consensual. So you have to give the school consent to assess your kiddo. If we unenroll, will we still be eligible for comp time? So compensatory education right now is about last spring. So if your child was enrolled in a public school and receiving 504 services and or special education services, they are due a meeting at request for consideration for compensatory education. So compensatory education is fixing something that happened behind, right? So you're still eligible for a special ed meeting to consider that. I have kiddos that have aged out. They've aged out. Can they have their comp ed? Yeah. Are they going to get their compensatory education? They are. Okay. So let's say you unenrolled your child, or you're sending them to Mrs. Cindy's day school, or a private church school, or you're going to homeschool. You could still receive your compensatory education. You could receive that in private tutoring. You could make your child available to the school for a certain time of the day. You could have it in a public library. You could have it at home. Whatever the committee agrees upon would be appropriate. Okay, did I answer all 72,564 of your questions? I did. Do you guys have any more questions? I know that sort of cleared everything up. Virtual is not an option in Tarrant County until September 28th. Hey guys from Missouri. Hey Karen. And first of all the Karens that I know, you wish you could be this much of a Karen. I'm going to say it doesn't hurt my feelings. I love it. Karen. It'll be a full year of subs virtually as well. Yeah, it probably will be a full year of subs virtually. Let's see. And yes, our school district asked for our input. Wasn't that nice? And I think your input actually gave them ways of thinking outside of the box. What instructional dose? DOSE? What instruction does HB elementary, what does that mean? Oh, she's whispering. What instruction does homebound elementary students receive? So it's not about elementary. So in Texas, the statute is 4 hours. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what it is. It's not a bonus program. You can't add something on. If a child's between 3 and 5 in PPCD, preschool programs for children with disabilities, or not early childhood, but 3 to 5, then it's half of that time. Why? Well, because you said your child couldn't medically tolerate going to school. So they come and deliver the instruction. It's usually broken up a couple days. It just depends. Some of my kiddos get an hour a day for 4 days. Some get an hour and a half. Love homebound teachers. And I love all teachers, except for the teachers that taught me biology. So it's 4 hours of instruction. That homebound teacher will go to your kid's science teacher and math teacher and get all of their instruction and bring it to you, teach them a shortened version of it. You will be responsible for making sure that your kiddo works on it when it's appropriate during the week. When they come back the next week, you give them your done work, your completed work, and they give you new work. Still have to take state testing if we're going to have that. Ugh, who wanted the state testing? Raise your hand if you wanted state testing. So that's what homebound looks like. However, this is what you should know. I have some parents that kind of got caught up in this. I have a kiddo that parents were requesting homebound. It's driven by the request of the parents. And the doctor wouldn't release the child afterwards. So you have to have homebound. It's a request from a medical doctor for consideration for the IEP team. And then the IEP team cannot let you come back to school until the doctor releases you. Okay? The homebound letter usually encompasses a semester. So we would say, it's my request that Billy Smith is receiving his education and or special education at home through December 31st, 2020, or until COVID's over, which will be 2050 or something like that. Yes, they're sending out information and requesting decisions. I love this. Until further notice. Until further notice. All right, online, not FAPE. Could you present a 10-day letter for private school? I could. A 10-day letter for private school. Tell me what that means. Okay. So when you file a federal, when you file for state due process or a federal, in federal court, sometimes at the beginning of those filings, we put in there, this is your 10-day notice that we're putting our child in private school. Yes. Again, when a family receives private school, paid for by the district, and this is just based on my experience, what do I know? If you want the school district to pay for your private school, you have to prove that the schooling that they had access to or as an option was not meaningful and it wasn't FAPE. So COVID kind of, that's not a consideration because the school is open when they open. So you could present a 10-day letter. I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. Until further notice. Decisions aren't binding until. Somebody said decisions aren't binding until 2 weeks prior to school. Okay. And then I've also heard schools are making you, some of the schools made you decide last Friday. Ideas for wording IEP for plans for remote during quarantine school closure if choosing in person. Ideas for wording IEP plans. So that's really specific. So I don't ever want my kiddo's IEP to be amended. If you amend the IEP, you're amending the delivery of instruction, the length of instruction, and the expectation from the student. So a lot of kiddos that stay home and do virtual, they're going to make unexpected progress because they have a small setting. They get to work and get it done. They're not impacted so much by their disability, right? So we look at how a child's disability impacts them in a general ed setting. The law never said we look at how a child's disability impacts them in the living room. We didn't do that. So the wording of the IEP plans, they're just going to cut it. They just are, and that's their legal right. So when I have kiddos that are removed from districts to go to out-of-district placements or psychiatric units or behavioral units or hospitalization, it's not, I don't really get to change it. But yeah, that's what they're gonna change the delivery time the expectation, the related services, and the instructional services. You're not going to have, somebody asked me the other day, if I have a nurse at, wait, no, if I have a full-time para at school, will they send them to my house? Send them to my house? No, they're not going to, would that be great? No, they're not going to do that. The para is for your child to be successful where? In school. Okay? Your full-time nurse is for your child to be successful in school. Okay? Yes. Yes, you may miss the prom. I'm not certain. That guidance was, they need to look at comprehensive. Not sure what that means. Replying to Sarah, where does providing notice for lack of FAPE and enrolling private come in if schools remain virtual? Well, at any time you can provide the school notice of what you're doing. But it's my experience. I have a little bit of it. I do about 400 IEP meetings a year plus mediation filing, federal filings, and then a ton of consultation. So in my experience, and of all the case law that I've ever read, and I like reading it, parents are awarded payment from the school for private when a hearing officer orders it. I've never seen a school, and maybe you have them. You want to go to private school? Not a problem. How do you spell that? All right, there you go. If you want to leave and go to private school, that's certainly your legal right. But if you're wanting them to pay for it, that's something totally different. And then also a lot of private schools, almost all private schools, are not required to deliver FAPE because they don't receive federal funds. Only people that receive federal funds are tied to federal requirements. So state colleges, what are those schools? Charter schools, public schools. I think that's all the schools, right? Schoolhouse Rock. Remember that? So Sarah has a ton of questions. She's so smart. So schools here are saying, Sarah, tell us where you live. Schools here are saying if child does not come to school door in mask, will be turned away. So we would call that in my world bologna sauce. I've actually seen the invoices. They are sending pallets and pallets and pallets and pallets of masks to school, right? Because the kids are going to eat them. They'll drop them in the toilet. It'll be stuck to their ketchup. So they're actually sending pallets of masks and those little things, right? What are those things called? Face shields. I think that we should just tattoo a mask on. Maybe like a henna you can wash off at night. So, but no, that's, if it sounds ridiculous, we're going to turn away children. One of the things that people will have to consider, which is not, we are considering that, is that, if they send them to school, maybe they're getting 2 meals. Maybe they're getting friends. Maybe they're getting to not be around their stressed Aunt Myrtle who is watching them. There's just so many components. Everybody's situation is totally different. I adopted a child that's in special education. This is also new to me. Things these days are so different from when I was in school almost 40 years ago. My head is spinning on what to do and where to go. Yes, it is spinning. So again, that's a lot kind of to unpack. I don't know how old your kiddo is. Again, if you guys want, none of the assessments have occurred. The assessments will start occurring again at the beginning of the year because schools are open. Our schools are open now. So the assessments have to continue if you make your child available. There are parents that will not make their child available. Okay? All right. Do you guys have any more questions? So we're going to be here again. And if you guys have any questions, just shoot the questions at Karen@specialeducationboss.com. Remember to like the channel, subscribe, share the video if you liked it. And if there's a topic you want us to train on and teach on, we will do that. We're still going to be teaching on all things special education, so you guys can be the special education boss. And remember,